what are learning analytics as a practical thing for instructors in the classroom? What are the things that you are all interested in finding out about learning analytics? And let's go ahead and just write them down. Any questions that we could have our contributors answer or attend to?
How often do the students check the online material?
All right, yeah.
And are they rated by performance? So I've had 2 online, partial online courses, and I did check that, and it was rated. You know, you could figure out the good students checked often, and I just want to make sure I'm checking it.
There's
the right
correlation
way.
there, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's important, right? Because we spend a lot of time creating these pages and modules and things like that. And if we do that and nobody looks at them, well, maybe that, and everybody does well in the class, maybe we didn't have to focus on that one so much. And maybe there's one that we didn't think was very good, but everybody looks at it. And that was important. Maybe that's they're spending too much time on it because, actually, how much time do they check it? And then how much time do they spend on it? Is that a question that we can ask? Maybe. Any other thoughts, questions? What do people want to know?
In terms of time also, is when did they look at the
Yeah.
thing as they look at it the night before the exam? Or did they look at it when the actual activity was going to be?
Yeah, probably the night before the exam, right? Other questions? Is that all we have to answer today? All right, there we go. Amanda, go ahead.
I was just curious to hear about like which metrics people have found most useful or informative in making changes or implementing any kind of data-driven decisions within the course.
All right, most useful metrics. Good, Theo.
How, I guess, behaviors of students might change over the course of the semester, like just based on demands and stuff.
Changing behavior.
Or awareness online. I mean, there's just a lot of factors there. I guess what that feeds into is just how do the things you see online mean the things you think they mean? I think that's kind of a crazy one. Right. I mean, it's like
This is a much deeper conversation than we
I think somebody said something about if it's left, if they left it open, were they actually reading it, or did they download it, or?
Oh, that's a really
Right.
good question. Are the metrics accurate in what they show? Ooh, I think Catherine has some frustrations there.
Read something.
Who knows?
Just walk out. Right.
Anything else? All right, Laura. Sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Similar to what you just mentioned, is there any implicit bias that's created on the instructor as a result of seeing it?
No, we all know instructors are biased, so.
Well, or how about tools?
I mean, is there a way to sort of make things anonymous? Totally. You just see total course time spent on the page versus the students.
Okay, good. All right.
Maybe sort of related to that and related to Amanda's comment, I'd be interested in knowing what analytics might tell us about the design of the course. So how do things structure, rather than thinking of them informing the student behavior, right? But that's my view as someone who helps build courses. So are there things about the way that you've sequenced the materials or things about the way that you're presenting the material that could be improved over time?
All right, I put down design implications.
I think likewise, when you make changes, like we have multiple iterations of this course, so every new iteration, we're making changes, and we'd like to know if those changes are useful to the students, if they are doing the knowledge check questions within the online modules that we've created for them.
Okay, any last thoughts before I unleash the contributors? All right. So here are some things to keep in mind. I know that Jennifer was. Is she still here?
I'm right
Wow. Well, we have another chair over here.
We do?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm okay.
That's cool. Okay.
Just in case someone comes in
And we have
late.
more chairs up here too, if you want to face the light. So I know Jennifer's taking notes on the activity sheet right now, I think.
Yes.
So those will show up right there, and I hope that these questions are being captured. I'm going to now flip it over to the contributors and say, what are your, let's say, top 3 things? No, let's go even shallower than that. Who are you and how do you use analytics in 2 minutes? And if anyone would like to volunteer to start first. All right, Miguel.
My name is Miguel Garcia. I teach at the business school. All my teaching now in the last 3 years has been strictly online. It's large enrollment classes. I've been thinking for a while with the number of people here about analytics for a while. And for me, I think we have to make several buckets. One is how you look at analytics when you teach only online, and how you look at analytics when you do a face-to-face course with online materials. I think that's different. The way you will look at analytics is different because in a strictly online course, the face-to-face relationship is different, and you only have very few inputs in that regard. So I rely a lot on the analytics. And also, for me, my class is, this semester just started this week. I have 275 students, and I look at 2 things. One thing is, when I look into analytics, is general course trends, how the course is doing overall, and then how I look at individuals, what is happening to it. And I'm interested in both things, the course overall and individuals. I think Canvas is limited in what they offer now, but it's being increased, and we get more and more every day. And there's a number of people here at Wisconsin-Madison working on these. And once we get access to the data behind the scene, I think we can start seeing a lot of more things. But still, it's kind of like we are learning as we go. And I would say that I use it every day. I have found a lot of information kind of online about ways to extract information from Canvas that you cannot get right before. There are a number of scripts that you can run behind. You can get a token to access the database behind it and then start pulling stuff. Some things are very intuitive, some things are not. For me, my class is strictly online, and then I have 47 assignments during the semester, 2 to 3 every week. Everything is online. So I get a lot of online input. I was just checking now, literally as we speak. And I think you have to take the analytics with a grain of salt and try to go a bit beyond the numbers. I was just looking at the first slide, when you go to analytics, I say activity by day. We are in the first week. So I have 17,000 page views in my course. So you will say, oh, that's quite a bit. Yeah, but it's out of 598 participations, 70,000 page views in 3 days. But that's not even half of the students. Half of the students have not even logged yet. So if you look at, 70,000 pages looks like a lot. Then you start digging a bit more, and half of the students have not even logged once yet. So you have to start introducing other pieces of information that you learn on the way. You don't learn the first day, but as you do this more and more, you start looking at these things. And I think there's a lot to do. I'm interested in general course trends, but also for me, it's very particular interest is how can I learn soon enough of people in trouble?
All right, yeah,
And that's my
prevention.
question.
Let me add another exclamation point to one of the things he said. This is all in its infancy, learning analytics, and the people that are looking into it on campus, they've been digging into these things for a while. But 10 years ago, we did not have that data available to us that we have right now. Now we have some data available to us as campus is starting to open up and give us some of these numbers back. Desire to Learn would sell us these numbers back for increasing costs as they gather them. But Canvas, we can get some of them back for, I think, for free. And so now we start getting some numbers, not all the numbers that we need, but they're starting to build interfaces for some of them. And reading between the lines or reading between the numbers is another one. Like, what do the trends indicate? Not just what do the numbers mean, but what do the trends indicate? Thank you, Catherine. Megan?
I'm Megan Cotter. I work at the school. I use learning analytics for the classes that we teach in the summer. So I teach med students and occupational and physical therapy students, and we during the academic year we have the med students, and that's more all the learning analytics are a bit more centralized at the med school, but we get to control our summer course and teach with the least. So when I use them, it's usually for spot checking the students that have done poorly on our first exam and seeing what their participation is. So I second Miguel's want to be able to try and get in there before that first exam. So we have a blended face-to-face course with a lot of online things. So it'd be nice to be able to identify those students that we think are not going to perform as well right away. Usually, since we are face-to-face, we have the opportunity to see them in lab and say, I don't know if this person is gonna do so well. So, so that's what I'm using it for. I do find the interface a little bit difficult to use. I think it's not as exact as I would like it to be. I can see, numbers of page views, but again, like, did they just click on it? I was just looking through, earlier in the summer, there was a discrepancy between students who, in the first couple weeks of the course, had, like 100 page views or something like that. And then there were 2 students that had like 6,000 page views. Who knows why? They just click really fast or what? So I guess I'm wondering what even.
They've got a script running in the browser.
So that's where some of my frustrations, but I do think it is helpful in looking to see, okay, was this student, before I even talk to them, I see that you only used, our online materials 2 days before the exam versus the week before the exam. So we can it helps me start that conversation with the student when we start talking to them after.
Provide some context and giving a conversation.
Yeah.
Catherine?
Yeah, I'm Kat Smith, and I'm faculty over at the Information School, which, as some of you know, is a small school with a very dynamic online presence. We've had an online master's for some years now. And so we are all our own instructional designers, which means that we learn a heck of a lot about building courses. It's actually kind of really handy. I totally resonate with some of what the previous 2 speakers said, but I want to add that this learning analytics isn't exclusive to online classes. So I've been flipping for a few years, and I actually have to check if my face-to-face students access stuff, because it's become very important that they access stuff. And the only difference is I can see them every week and sort of build them out because I see them. But I also teach a very large online undergraduate, typically in the summers. And so I think something very important is this notion that I feel about analytics like I do about Wikipedia. It's a great place to start, but you do not want to stop there. Because what it does, totally, it signals kids who are going to have difficulty if we don't nip this in the bud, but that's just as true for the face-to-face students as it is for the online students.
Awesome. All right, you're ready? No. Okay, Sarah, you're official. Also, by the way, I've identified people and talked to them ahead of time about coming and being contributors, but if you have other things to say, please raise your hand and join in, because I know that I don't know everybody who has dug into learning analytics, and I would love to know you better. So, please.
Okay, so work at the medical school of medicine and public health, and we teach medical students for the fall and spring. We don't interact with the medical students as much as we used to, and we create a lot of online modules for them. And we don't get tons of feedback from the medical students about this online modules. We just get a few students that maybe give us some written feedback. It's really difficult to know how they're interacting with the online modules. So that's a big, that's the place that we really started. So how they are accessing it, when they're accessing it, are they completing it? Are they doing the knowledge check questions? We want to know that. We also have an ebook that has embedded like H5P questions into it. And we would like to know if those, we're starting to be able to kind of track those H5P questions, or hopefully we will be able to this semester. So we'd like to know, are the students, interacting with those questions? Are they using those questions like we think that they are? Because they're supposed to be kind of knowledge check questions to review the material that they've just read. So we really want to know how the students are interacting with our online materials.
Sarah, somehow I haven't got your name here under e-texts, so I'm on back on December 6th, okay?
Okay. So medical school is, it's still pretty new, and all of like the file formats, getting everything into the right format so that you can track all of the online modules and like the student behavior with that. So I think this semester, we've now done this is the third iteration. So this semester, we're actually going to have all of our files in the right format, and I think we're going to be able to start looking at the data. But all that data is in this thing called Learning Locker, and Learning Locker is still very confusing in the way that it produces like outputs of data. So kind of initially just looking at it, like students have interacted with it, and it's just like it's an interaction. So what does that mean? And it's a completion, but I don't know. It's confusing to look at the data. So I think a big part of what we have to do is like refine our questions and really like what do we want to know about the students? Really specific questions that the data from Learning Locker can tell us.
So Learning Locker is a thing that we'll have to unpack later on today, and somebody can talk about that, right?
I think we can.
Sorry, Kim.
Kim, I've got you down as a contributor. Was that accurate?
I can be. I guess I'd like to hear what other people say. I'll plan to contribute later, trust me.
Other thoughts, other instructors who use the learning, and then, yes.
I just wanted to follow up because I'm actually working on e-text for my class, and we'll be using Learning Locker, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Maybe I'll follow up with you somewhere.
Okay, December 6th.
But also, I'm a contributor, so I'll introduce myself too. I'm Lynn Prost, and I teach in the biochemistry department. And I teach a lab, lecture, and seminar course. And I came to Learning Analytics over the past few years. I've been adding a lot of online materials in my course to help students prepare for the labs, like demonstration video type things. And I wanted to have some measure of whether students were using them, whether they were helpful. And so I was interested in sort of tracking student use of these new online tools to sort of evaluate whether, the time that I was putting into creating them was paying off. So the one tool that I wanted to kind of share with people, because I didn't know about it when I first started using Canvas, is that student access report that you can download, which is basically an output from Canvas of every clip that a student has taken in your course. And so you end up with this huge Excel file. Do people know what I'm talking about? Have other people done?
There's a caveat which is important, but we keep going.
So for me, it was helpful because I could sort by, you get this huge Excel table, and then you can sort by like the name of the page or whatever. So that I could find I could sort and select this group of pages that were the new material that I created and see how many views or how many clicks I had gotten. And I don't think it tells you the amount of time that students work on these things. And certainly we've already brought up the issues of what does a clip on something mean. But for me, that was at least a starting point in a way that I could sort data to find what I was looking for. Because I find this way too general to be helpful.
Okay, tell me one more time, what was that thing called?
Student access report.
It's the workaround from the community college professor in Ohio that's come up before.
Illinois, Richland
Illinois.
College,
Yeah.
Jamestown.
So it's super, this guy
Is that
I keep saying we
Jim
should just hire this guy because he does all this wonderful stuff that came up with.
Yeah.
It's really good for a first pass. So the caveat I have is it does not capture non-clickers. I have a summer class of 175 and I need to know who didn't access things. So it took me a while to be told that. I'm like, oh, okay. So you have to basically do a second pass, which is, I'm sure there's a way to program this, and I just haven't had time to manually check against the class list who does not show up in the spreadsheet.
Sure, yeah,
So that's the
I
second
think
pass.
it's what your goal is.
Yes,
you know?
right.
So I was doing this after the semester was over
Mhm.
to look back at how used these different things were. And that, right, if I was trying to track a specific student, that would be a terrible.
Or all
It's really
students who did
difficult way
not
to do
participate, which was my
Yeah.
problem.
Does Kaltura give different analytics than, you guys know much about that?
So, great question, and I had written down one of the things, other sources. I know, Miguel, you use Kaltura for learning analytics in some areas because it gives data that Canvas does not,
Yeah.
about, and Captain, you do as well, on how much time they've spent on it, whether they've paused or not.
So is there a way to tie those two together? Like, if you know a pipeline or a path students are taking, can you like identify
Yeah,
more?
what I do is, all my lectures are in the form of podcasts that are residing in Kaltura, but I have embedded them into Canvas, so they don't have to authenticate twice.
Right.
But also Kaltura keeps track not only how many people listen to it, but how many people started to listen to it and drop halfway through, where do they drop it, and you get some detailed statistics. The problem is it's not integrated with Canvas, so you have to go to Kaltura and look at that separately. So you can get some combination, but it's not fully integrated.
Okay. Just the
Also-
analytics you're talking about, you have to look at separately.
Yeah, you have to go to Kaltura and look at the analytics of your files there. But in order for you to keep track, you have to embed the link in Canvas. And that has two purposes. First, it keeps track, but also people don't have to authenticate twice.
And that's, we will have an active teaching lab on Kaltura and one on podcasts. So,
Can I just ask one more question about it?
yeah.
If it's embedded within Canvas, you still get the same analytics from that?
No, the
Do they
only
actually have to
analytics
navigate
you
it?
get is that they clicked into it, then you have to go to Kaltura separately to get those analytics.
But if they view the video of the Kaltura video
You
in
know
Canvas.
they went to the video.
Yeah, okay.
That's all you can see in
Oh,
Canvas
but you
data,
wouldn't be able to
unfortunately.
see any of the behavior.
In Canvas, then you have to go to Kaltura and see how many people watch it completely. how
This
many
time next year,
drop
hopefully that will
halfway
be
through.
different, but.
Okay.
And this is one of the things that's tricky about analytics in general, right? We get data from all these different sources that maybe we can connect the dots, but oftentimes we can't. Like you can go to Kaltura and see what happens. You don't necessarily know, you probably actually can tell where it came from, but it's not seamlessly connected to each other. And maybe we have a yet to that growth mindset, right? Maybe that'll happen someday. Maybe it won't. I mean, there's a lot of systems that are complicated and they don't all talk to each other very well sometimes. Those of you who are using e-texts and e-books, that's another one. You get some you get some analytics for that, but they are not necessarily connected to Canvas other than they went to that resource. So now if you've got Kaltura things in that, you've got 3 different sets of resources that you can go to if you have the time and effort. But part of being a human is balancing these things, and is it worth it to identify the students? Like, how much effort do we spend in looking at analytics in order to prevent some problems and in order to fix this stuff? Because we're only human, we only have a certain amount of time in our lives. How do you guys balance that?
Welcome to paradise.
For the student access report, there's a UWKB document that explains how it works in our instance.
All right, excellent. So Sarah noticed here that I had gone into the help and then to the Ask the Community here. And if you're not part of the Canvas community, I encourage that you go there with a big capital D disclaimer, capital C caveat. Not all the solutions that are talked about in the Canvas community, and there are a lot of workarounds and a lot of really clever things that instructors using Canvas have done to do the things that Canvas doesn't let them do easily. Some of them are clunky, some of them are fraught with issues that have issues. But it's still a really good resource. And sometimes we collect the best of them and we turn them into a campus resource. And I think the Student Access Report is one example of that, that was developed elsewhere. We said it needs to do some tweaking on this and then we can implement it here. Is that accurate? I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
And now we're using it here. So it's a really great resource that the Canvas community. And so there is a KB doc on that, and I think Jennifer will find it and add it to the activity sheet.
75374.
75374. All right. So, how many of you have it? Let's go through the basic learning analytics in Canvas real quick here, okay? And this is just Canvas. Probably not going to get a chance to dig into it in a lot of other, like in Kaltura today or any of the e-texts, but maybe we can talk about it in those labs. Good stuff. All right, so there's your course page, and we're at the home page here. Up in this corner is the view course analytics. It's got a little graph on there. If you've never done this before, this is a nice eye-opening thing.
Just so you know, I'm looking into this course, the active teaching one. Maybe it's because I'm in the fall one versus the spring one, but
You are not an instructor.
yeah,
So,
that was my question.
good point. The students cannot access this, right? Good question. If you're a principal instructor, can you access this?
In my own
Or
class.
only teachers? Okay, yes, good. So your role, can TAs access this?
Yes.
All right.
Anybody in instructional role can.
Anybody in an instructional role in
Can
People tab
yeah.
has access to this.
Students do have access to a grade distribution chart. So they are allowed to see some analytics, but not,
Anonymous one, right? Yes, yeah,
because it's
so
something you have to deactivate, so they are allowed to see it by default.
is that a deactivation that you can set in the settings?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is, but you
Where
can do it.
You
So-
go to
Go into
settings.
Yeah.
Where do I see it as a student?
Your settings, more.
I don't know, I've never been a student in a Canvas class, I would know where to find it, but I know
So-
students are allowed.
For instructors to change it, go into settings,
Or details.
course details, that top tab over here,
Yeah, go down.
and then scroll all the way down to more options, which is this one on the very bottom here. And that's the one right here. So yeah, again, if you're not familiar with Canvas, there's a lot of like hidden things that you have to know what just any link in there, just click on it. If you see one of those shish kebabs, which are the 3 vertical dots, that's just but vertical. Click on those because they will reveal things that you didn't know were on the page before. It's one of those kind of puzzle adventures, but not as fun. So yeah, good point.
So is that option, their grade as it relates to other people's courses?
Yeah.
So they can see the low, the high, and the
Okay.
average.
And that's good information to know, like, because sometimes I'm like, I feel like I'm doing great. This is just a really hard class. And then I look at that and I'm like, oh, I'm really doing terrible. I should study more. And we can talk about pattern and analytics and recommendations, some of the other tools that campus is looking at. And we actually have active teaching labs on that where the students can self-assess their own study time and see how that compares to other people in the class. And Miguel, you're part of that. Who else was part of the analytics pattern and our? It does not matter. Okay, so that was a student one. Good points. But for instructors, We click on the course analytics thing over on the home page in the corner over there, and we get this lovely chart here where we have the activity by the date for the whole class. All of those bars have rollovers. So you can see, you can't read it right now, but on this bar right here, April 2nd, 2018, 12 participants, 101 page views. So that gives you some trends. You can look at it across the semester. You can see that the big peaks are oftentimes right before the tests. You know, there's a little run up to the exams and such. We don't have a lot of submissions in our active teaching class, so this is not really a good representation, but we've had some submissions against a rollover. Down below, you can see the student view, all the students in the class and all of their individual page views, participations, submissions, on time, late, missing, and then the current score. Up in the top corner over here, you can click on page views only versus participation. Actually, that's what the black is participation and blue is page view. This little slider over here from graph view to chart view. Chart view gives you the same stuff in a table. This graphic table. But then down below, it's got broken down into submissions, grades, and then the student information. So there's some information that you can get there. What's the most useful about this, anyone? What do you use the most? What's the biggest number that you look at? Any contributor or anyone else? Do you use it? Laura uses it.
I've used it in the past with a 5-day course I teach with graduate students over the summer. And I found it helpful because we know that we're cramming a lot of content into those 5 days. And so I often switch to the chart view first because I find the graphs are hard to read. The scale for me isn't very meaningful.
Okay.
And I've used the submissions one, the second one down. Just helps me understand where students are experiencing the most stress with turning things in late. And that has helped me in the next iteration think about how I time some of that assignments and where I'm like front loading or pushing more assignments later for students.
Okay.
Just
So,
one way I've used it.
Good. Different iterations, you make changes.
Yeah, I actually typically am sorting by, so that the people who are not posting at all or very little show up in the first couple weeks of the class. That is usually a signal to me that those individual students might need a nudge or a question, like everything okay? So I'm using it in the aggregate, looking at the people who are the least participatory.
What does that participation column refer to?
Yeah, what kind of participation?
It refers to
Question.
everything, that's the problem. So it's only very useful in a large
It's-
general
Well,
sense.
it's different than views, so it must be something that they have to.
It's a discussion.
Is it a discussion?
Quiz,
assignment,
anytime you
submit something.
Yeah.
Does it have to be a graded discussion?
So Kat, you're looking at that in terms of ways for you to know who is engaged in this, and so in class,
Right.
you could do something
Right.
in class to know who you want, that you want to.
Right, so
both
it's,
engage.
it's not aimed at an individual, but it
Right.
helps me see
Yeah.
which individuals
Right.
are probably.
Right. So if you see
It's really
something, you
early.
really know that's
Right.
somebody who's maybe not as
Right.
engaged as other
Yes.
people. So.
Can we talk about that just as a little sidebar? When you identify the students that are struggling, how do you approach them?
Well, struggling as in failing or struggling as in not logging in every 5 seconds?
Yeah.
So that's-
If there's a correlation, I guess.
I mean, I think it's an important comment to make. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about student behavior. What is your expectation for the course and their access to online content? So for you, a struggling student is one who, on the first week, is only logged in 5 or 6 times, or is
Oh, I
it-
mean, not at all, or once, so I'm talking 100% online class.
Okay.
This saved my rear end last year. I had a student, distant undergrad, which is unusual, and I don't think should be allowed to happen, but a distant undergrad in another state who was doing 100% online course and did not log in at all for the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And was insisting that they had. So I'm like, oh, I can tell that you haven't gone near the site. So that's my struggling. It's like somebody who's enrolled in an online class doesn't drop it but never logs on, there's something wrong there, right?
So if they're not logged on, obviously they can't do the work, they can't
Right.
keep up, they can't do the grades, yeah.
Right.
And this has an important, for those who have suffered an important implication, when someone drops the course, then you get a call from the finance department, say, this person is aligned, is waiting to get reimbursed for this class because they enrolled, but they never participated. So you have to go back and check. If they submit an assignment, even if they drop the class, then they are not eligible to be reimbursed. But if they didn't do anything, then you can say. The problem now with the change that has been in Canvas since last semester, before you were able to create sections, you cannot do that anymore. And now the problem is, if someone drops the class, they disappear from Canvas. And if it is a strictly online class, they disappear and they disappear with everything. So they ask me, was this guy able to do anything in class? Did he participate? If he has dropped the class, I have no record of anything.
That's a big difference with D2L. In D2L, you can see withdrawals and when they happen.
But after this semester, I used to create sections because I have to handle 75, so I create 4 sections for my TA, so it's easy for management. So when you have students in sections, they will drop the class and they will drop the course, but it will stay in the section. So you keep the whole history. Now you cannot do that. So when they drop, they are gone with every record, everything. So unless you do backups every week or every day, you have no history of what they did, what they submitted, what grade they got, anything. Once they drop, and this is especially an issue for me because it's an strictly online class. So if you have other inputs, then, but if it is online and someone dropped the class 3 weeks into the course, you have no record of anything.
This is a bigger point here is that Canvas changes every 3 weeks. Sometimes the changes are small, sometimes the changes are bigger. In addition to Canvas changing, the policies on campus are changing. So the implementation of Canvas is changing. You may have noticed this year, new roles, instructional roles, where a lot of instructors are now principal instructors instead of teachers. There are some privileges that have gone away with moving into that new role, including not being able to create new sections. And a lot of this is policy driven. So even though Canvas can let you do certain things, our implementation of it has been adjusted according to policy, lawyers, administrators, for very good reasons. But they're not always obvious.
And they have not been communicated. So you learn as you go.
Sometimes they're not communicated as well as maybe.
I will say, there's an awesome new knowledge base document that has a nice grid of all the roles. So if you're wondering about exactly all of the configurations, that was recently updated and I found it really helpful. It doesn't explain the why, but it at least explains exactly the what.
You know what the number is?
What you have. I don't know the number, I'm sorry. If you look for Canvas course roles, and specifically the course level roles, is what's been updated.
63420.
Thanks, Sarah.
63420. I love when people say that. Look at Canvas course rules and permissions. So you've got the teacher, what the teacher can do. You've got the co-teacher. Oh, wow, even highlights as I go over. Keep it getting better. Maybe used to be.
This is we have a dedicated document writer on our sheet.
That's awesome. Good.
Makes a difference.
It used to be hard to navigate sometimes, and not always as clear as it could be. I love this. Good.
So I was interested in, Jeff, when you were going around, you said something about bias and getting feedback. Can you say more about what you're concerned about?
Yeah, I think it's related to the conversation we're having about student behavior. I mean, so let's assume, I've never done a fully online class. So I guess online activities were in face-to-face. A student who just logs in to submit, if you just look at the analytic, it seems to be that student is not participating versus a student who is logged in 9,000 times, and you judge that person based on the data. But I think we should get back to the question of what is the expectation for participation on campus for students. I think we've beaten around the bush, I mean, the entire time, but
Really good
we have all these analytics and we're talking about the way that we evaluate students, but I don't think the conversation has gone towards what is the expectation for students with the online platform itself.
Do we use, does anyone, do we use these analytics for the grading? How are they related to the grading? We can see that there is maybe a correlation, but do we go and say, oh, your expectation is that you need to log in every day for 8 minutes or 12 minutes or 30 minutes or spending 2 hours on it for every credit, how do we negotiate that? How do we negotiate that?
So I use a rubric. I grade discussions with a rubric, and that helps me make my expectations super clear to the students. I have never in 15 years of teaching partly online every year used time or duration as anything, because I've heard too many students tell me after they graduate that they fast forward everything, that they do their laundry. I mean, you have no idea what they're doing. They can just click the button and go away.
Right.
So I stopped using that like 14 years ago. But if you have a rubric and you do speed grading and you set up discussion as a rubric graded thing, they see, oh, I get graded down if I log in the last half hour the discussion board is open.
All right, and in that respect, it makes sense because when you participate in a discussion, adds to the quality of the discussion. And if you are only participating at the tail end of it, you're not able to participate fully into it.
Right, so
For
having
whatever
the,
reason.
having the rubric allows me to set my expectations, make them very clear, and then we can dialogue about them. If I have somebody say, why do you want 3 times, why not 4 times or 2 times? We talk about that. I think it's the industry standard is like 3 times a week, and it really works. So it sets up the conversation, and then you grade by that. But the rubric is what enables that to happen.
I think one thing, which I would get from what you're saying is, when you look at like page counts, those types of things, if James is really smart and he reads that page once and gets it, and I'm stupid and I need to read that page 6 times, you look at page counts, you may think that I am smarter than James because I looked at something more times than James did, and so that bias, I think, does kind of come into play when then you come and look at the two of us. What is your impression of us as students? That's, I think, really important to think about.
There's also the question of the student who downloads the material from
Right,
online access.
right,
Maybe their data
right,
plan doesn't
right,
allow them to be connected all the time. They don't have constant Wi-Fi, so you can easily create disparities in expectations.
Yeah, but when you've been doing this for a while, and I have to say, in my case, this is my own experience, first because it's only online, and second because it's large numbers. You start seeing and understanding the parents. I have weekly assignments that are graded with a rubric, every single one. So I don't look how many page views or how many times, but if you don't log once in 2 weeks, you already missed a certain number of assignments because you didn't even log in to submit them.
Right.
So when you start seeing is this pattern, people who haven't logged in 3 weeks, it's not just, oh, they didn't look at the materials. You haven't logged in 3 weeks, it means you have missed 3 weeks of assignments.
I think there's, so I think your point is really well taken, in that as we use these data, as we become more mature and sophisticated in analyzing them, but as new people come in and look at these things, I think it's easy to make assumptions and make judgments on things, not understanding all of those experiences that have got.
And that's what I mean when I say, for example, I look at my course today, 17,000 page views. If you don't know anything, that looks like a lot. And then when you dig a bit more, then you know that more than half of the students have not even logged once yet.
Right.
So then you start kind of like putting things in context, but there is no like a formula. It's like, as you've been doing this for a while, you know your class, you know your content, you know your material, then you start kind of seeing, kind of like learning what to look for.
This is a novice versus expert thing in any field, and teaching, the same thing happens. The people that are very experienced in teaching, they start to recognize patterns over the years and realize things.
I think it's slightly different though, that each person potentially can be on their own in making their own assumptions about that data that may or may not be accurate, right? So just because you have done a good job of looking at that data and making assumptions, somebody else could look at that same data and make different assumptions that may be obvious or not obvious to them, whether they're looking
This is
Yeah, but for
why
example,
conversations are-
going to your question, what I've learned is, now it's too early, but once a few weeks after the start of the semester, I just go through the analytics for each student, go like weekly. And you look at that graph that you have there with the bars, and the fact that you haven't logged a lot doesn't mean that you have done bad. But usually what I've learned is people who haven't logged a lot sometimes are the ones who I have to pay more attention. So it's not like, it doesn't work in both ways, but it gives you hints of where to start looking for. And again, no magic formula, but you can start seeing patterns, if you want to call them. And people who log a lot usually tend to do better than people who log very little. But the people who log very little doesn't necessarily mean they're doing bad. But usually the people who are doing bad haven't logged a lot. In general, and then with all the exceptions that you want to put into it. But again, you have 10 students, that don't make sense, but you have 300, you can start seeing these things.
If you haven't seen the individual view yet, let me just show it to you. I'm gonna use Lane here because he's gone, so we can pick on him. Hi, Lane. So I chose him because he got 62 page views. He's like, used to be one of our most active people. It doesn't really show a lot, but again, individual information, activity by date. There's a little bit, 61 page views between January 29th and February 4th. So you look at it and say 61 page views, wow, that's a lot. But if you go in and you look at the specific details, all that happened like in this amount of time, and then the rest of.
Yeah, but the difference is, for example, if you have in my case 3-4 assignments per week. So I have halfway through the semester, that column, this column, and the grade for each week. So that's when you start seeing someone who is not logging, then it turns out that he's missing a lot of the assignments. Not necessarily mean that someone who doesn't log a lot. Then you look at someone who hasn't logged a lot, but has everything in green. I mean, they're still submitting. They don't log a lot, but maybe they're very efficient. They're very effective and efficient. But when you start seeing right here, then you start seeing that these people come and log in and disappear for 2 weeks, then they come back. And again, not magic formula, but you kind of start seeing. I mean, I've been doing 300 students 3 semesters a year for 3 years now. So kind of like same course. So you start kind of like.
And in Canvas.
Yeah, understanding some kind of.
Yeah, good.
So just I'm curious, kind of trying to correlate what you were saying. It seems like what you really want to do is you want to get the correlation factor between grades and activity. Because you're saying people who aren't active tend not to be doing well. What she was saying is, was that I might not need to click as many times to do well if I.
But it's got to be a supporting thing. I don't think we
That's
can
what I'm
ever
saying.
look
I
at
think you
this
need-
as this guy's not doing
That's
well
what I'm
because
saying.
you're
I
not.
think you need multiple stats. You need
And that's why I
you
love
need
that we're
correlation.
using the rubrics to grade everything. Jeff, you had another thing and then.
Yeah, there's just 2 things. The first is, I think we could also get back to the question you asked half an hour ago about how do you confirm a student and should you? And then B, if the student is meeting course expectations, what's the relevance of their online participation?
Yeah.
If they're not failing the class, then they're obviously their investment is their investment.
Yeah,
So,
if
I
their
mean, the question
rubrics
is
are
how- what
all
do you do with this
working.
analytic? You have all this data. What are you confronting students and saying, I realize that your participation is tailed off somehow magically, or still submitting assignments, what's going on? Have you ever had conversations with those students, or is it sort of just for you as an instructor, you're taking notes on?
I want
yourself?
to understand patterns to kind of like act when needed. Usually I touch base with, in my class, because I have weekly assignments.
Right.
If you don't log in, you cannot submit anything.
Right, so it's the same as, not showing up for an exam, so,
Right.
face-to-face class.
Yeah, but the problem is this is a strictly online class, so I never met the students. This is my only way of communicating with them. I don't have any other thing. So if you don't log in, you cannot do anything in this class. You cannot read the materials, you cannot submit assignments. Because even to submit, everything is done through Canvas. Every single thing, even communication among us. So again, because it's strictly online, I have students who are here, students who are at the work, who are overseas. So if they don't use Canvas,
It's like not even coming to class.
they're
It's
not even
coming to
like,
the
they're
exam.
not
It's
part
coming
of
to
this.
the
It's not
class.
like, I go face-to-face class, but then I don't look at the website. That's one thing. But if the only way of communicating is through Canvas and you don't log into Canvas, we have an issue.
Theo, you got a thing?
Um,
And then Kim.
does this data export to any other formats, or is this the dashboard and is this the?
My understanding is the student access report does this at the student level. Is there reports available or downloadable at the course level? I don't know.
Not easily.
Not easily, okay. And
Yeah.
the hesitation in that voice indicates that this is still a big problem as we started the session with that.
And that's where there is some third-party scripts that you run in Google. You add a token to your Canvas instance so you can pull data. And then there are some people who have created a script that will create a table with each student, how many times they participate in the discussion forum, which week. It aggregates everything in a meaningful way.
But I'm gonna add a disclaimer on that, that is not a supported UW.
That is not a sanctioned
Yeah.
way to get your data.
It is not sanctioned.
It's not
because-
sanctioned.
So, and again, about the community, there are solutions out there. They are not all, they've not all passed the privacy policies of UW Madison campus. So be careful which ones you use.
Yeah.
Kim.
I just wanted to weigh, I know we're getting close on time, but I wanted to just weigh in. I've been listening from the back here. I'm sorry, if you don't know me, I'm Kim Arnold. I'm do academic technology. And I lead the learning analytics initiative here on campus. And what I want to say is that a lot of the issues that you guys are struggling with, we're very aware of, and we have some solutions on the way. We have some new infrastructure coming in that is beginning to integrate disparate data sources, so we get an easier way to see holistic views of students across tools. And also a lot of the things you're saying about the questions of data here and what you want to be able to see. We have a dashboard coming hopefully in spring 2019.
Kim, is this part of the student digital
Fingers
ecosystem?
crossed. It is. So this is under the auspices of the Learning Analytics Roadmap Committee, which the provost established, which is an advisory group to the student digital ecosystem.
How many of you have heard of the student digital ecosystem before? Okay, and this is, just as a quick overview, there were like, I'm gonna embellish here, over 500 million different systems, and none of them talked to each other before. In the background, with student data, from the registrar's office, and like every element of that. And they're starting to pull them together into smaller numbers that will be able to talk to each other, and that is part of the ecosystem, the student digital ecosystem. And that helps us make these numbers a little bit more meaningful because they'll be connected to other things. Now, I want to talk about Vanderbilt. Is it Vanderbilt for just a minute? There is a system in Vanderbilt. Kim, you probably know a lot more about this, but students can opt in, and every time that the students, I think it's opt in, it might not be opt in, swipe their card to go in and work out, that data is part of that. And that is connected with their grades. Not as you didn't work out enough, but it's on the same system is what I'm saying. So if a student said, oh, I totally went to class that day, and I don't know if this is all, big brothery, right? But they are obviously checked into and working on the treadmill.
Does it check in on the treadmill or by the water?
The treadmill shuts off and they go flying off. No, I don't know what happens.
Okay.
But it's a very inclusive, very big brothery type system. On the one hand, it's big brothery. On the other hand, there's a integration of data that can help the students, it can help the instructors, it can help the university have a much more effective thing. Is this good? Is this bad? I see a lot of grimaces on the faces here, and it's not as bad as it won't shut them off of that.
I was gonna say, what you find is that students want this more integrated data life, especially traditional 18 to 21-year-olds, right? They've grown up with this, they expect to have it. And so a lot of students are actually asking for this. And this is internationally, it's not just in this country there. Why can't I integrate all of my activity as a student? And most institutions are not touching it for ethical and privacy reasons, but some are really pushing the envelope,
So we are out of time. Thank you all for coming today. Are there any real quick things that we did not talk about? Anonymity. We didn't talk about qualitative data at all. You can get on the sheet, there's a thing on the activity sheet about that. Surveys, graded surveys, you can give them a grade for giving you qualitative data. If the numbers don't give you enough information. Thank you all for coming, we're out of time. Sorry we don't have another hour. However, we do have until 10 o'clock before we get kicked out of this room, so if you want to stick around and talk to me, I'll stick around. Anyone else, if you guys want to stick around, please do. Next Friday, come and join us on Trigger Warnings.